Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be looking at an interesting book. Now, please excuse the copy of this book. This is very, very old. This is The Upstairs Room. It's by Johanna Reiss. Obviously, you cannot tell. There's the author name. You want to get closer there. This is obviously my copy. It's very, very old. Had it for a very long time. I think it originally belonged to my sister. So this is a Holocaust book to an extent. I think I already covered Hide and Seek, which is a very similar book. These are the books that I recommend kind of in place of Diary of Anne Frank. Both of them are true stories. Both of them have happier endings, but again, they are true stories. These are what we would call more memoirs. So these women, in the case of Hide and Seek, which would be Ida Vos, in this case, this is Johanna Reiss. These women survived and are telling the story of their lives in hiding as adults. So they were both children. So in this case, Johanna was, when things started kind of getting inklings of what was going on, because they were in Denmark, which was then called Holland. When she was about maybe 4, things didn't really start getting dangerous until she was about 8. So it was, you started hearing things when she was young. Now, her mother was very sick. Her mother, they thought about leaving. Her mother was, I believe, dying of kidney failure. So when the deportation started happening, she was about 8 years old, I think, in these stories. She had 2 older sisters, Rachel, and I can't remember her other, Sony, I believe is the pronunciation of her other sister. Now, both of them were, I think Sony was about 16 when this was happening. Her sister, older sister Rachel, was 18, I believe. So they were much, much older than her. And her father was, what did he do for a living? She would go with him. He was a salesman to an extent. He sold milk or cows. I can't remember which. He was kind of a salesman. He went around on a bicycle, which again is very common in Denmark. Actually, it's the Netherlands, sorry. Not Denmark. Holland was the Netherlands. So she would go with her father when she was very young. And so when the deportation, her mother is dying. So her mother is not a major part of the story because the entire family goes into hiding at different times. Her father, I believe, goes first because they start indicating, they put their mother in the hospital because she's dying. And they have to bring food to her. Her father goes into hiding first because they're calling on the men. So he goes into those networks and disappears. And then the next person to go is Johanna herself, who I believe she uses a different name. And here's the cover of the book. This is what the actual cover looks like, so I'll try to hold on to this. But she goes by a different name. She called, what on earth does she go by when she's in this book? I think it's Annie. So, and then they short for Johanna. So this is the cover of the book, and she's relatively young. So she goes next. Basically, I think they dye her hair, and I think cut it. So she's pretending to be a boy, and they go to a different town, and they go into hiding with this older man and this older woman who, well, actually, no, she goes into with a couple who has a daughter, and then her sister Sonny eventually joins her, and then Rachel stays until their mother dies, and she stays with a priest for a while because again, they're trying to deport them. And then eventually she leaves and she ends up staying with a Catholic priest. So, Sony and their father is somewhere else as well. They don't actually see their father until the end of the war. In fact, I think they see her older sister Rachel all of once before the end of the war. So Sony is her eventually, because the other people who take them in are kind of afraid. They would hide them in. If the Germans came looking, they had like an underground bunker in their backyard that would go hiding. They actually end up next door with another couple, an older couple, and his mother, the husband's mother. And they're hiding pretty much in one of two rooms for several years. And Sony keeps her sister walking around because they don't want to be hanging around in bed again. But again, they are hiding in an upstairs bedroom for years. For several years. At some point in time, Sony just she can't do it anymore. She's a teenager. She gets false papers and goes to work on a neighboring farm. And so Johanna is there pretty much by herself for a couple of years. She sees her sister Rachel maybe once or twice in this time. Periodically, she ends up hiding behind a wall. So behind a bookshelf is where she'll go and hide in case the Germans show up. And at one point in time, the Germans, I believe, are in this house, and she nearly gets caught. But she does, in fact, survive the war. In fact, I will probably see if I can get a hold of it if it's still published. There is a second book where she talks about what goes on after the war. I'll try to see if that's still being published and get a hold of that. Obviously, I've owned this book for many, many years. But this is a true story. She survives the war hiding. And at one point in time, they're conscripting the men. So the man of this house goes into hiding. And he leaves. And the women become afraid. And she ends up going next door and hiding in the bunker down below. Which, of course, she hates because she's underground. She's underground. And it's cold and it's kind of dark. And when he comes back, he's infuriated. It's like he comes and gets her. It's like, get out of here. Get back into this house. What the heck? What? He yells at his mother and his wife. It's like, no. Get back in the house. Do not be hiding underground like this. So, and that's how she survives the war. I mean, she's Jewish, she's in hiding, and she survives. And eventually, of course, the war ends. And she talks about how she recorded this for her daughters. It's eventually, I believe she becomes a French teacher. And she wrote this down for her daughters, and she didn't realize how much she really remembered because they didn't talk about it. She never really talked about it. Her sister Rachel, if I remember correctly, becomes Catholic. And I don't really know what happens to her other sister. I think they all obviously survived the war, so does their father. Her father remarries. I've seen a little bit of the second book. He marries a woman whose daughter, I believe, has died in the Holocaust. So she's killed during this genocide during World War II. And so I can't remember that much. And I don't even know if that book's still in publication. This is the more well-known book. But it is very interesting. Again, she's writing this as a memoir as an adult for her daughters. These are from her memories. And they talk about how people would consider the people who hid them heroes. And they're like, no, we're not heroes. We're just people. The good, the bad. And she does show that they're human. But in many ways, they were, in fact, heroes. Like, what else were we supposed to do? We were doing what any human being would do to protect other people. So that's what they considered themselves. They were doing what was necessary to help other human beings. Now imagine, I mean, Johanna Reiss was about 8 years old, and she was hiding from, at minimum, 5 years. Hiding. Not really being able to go outside. In the upstairs, in one or two of these bedrooms upstairs, and it varied for time of year. For years. So that's, I mean, consider she's 8, so 9. Yeah, she was about 14. At minimum. If she went in like 1940. I believe that was roughly about the same time. Yeah. 39 is when the war started. So at minimum, she went into hiding in like 40, 42. So, but let's see. 33. Let's see if she says that, because she has an introduction when they attack Denmark. Yeah. Yeah. It was about 1940, so she essentially would have been at minimum 41, but she would, so that's 4 years. 4 to 5 years hiding. I mean, it's a long time to be scared for your life and to not be able to go outside and not to be free, essentially. So she she went through her early adolescence and her preteen age mostly alone, upstairs with two older women. Her older sister left. She didn't see her father for that entire time. Her mother had died. So it's a very interesting tale. And again, it's very, very true. It's a memoir of what she remembers of her life for this period of time. I think she goes back and visits them. That's kind of how she ends the book. So, yeah, she didn't set out to write a book. It's like she didn't think it would take her more than a week to write this down. When she started, she found out how much she remembered of things that she never talked about with anyone because they were too painful. So, she was brought up in Holland. She graduated from college, taught elementary school for several years before coming to the United States, and she lives in New York City. So, and yeah, eventually, yeah, at the end, she eventually takes her children, to visit these people, and it's like they saved her life. And they did something amazing. They did something terrifying. They knew they could get killed if they were caught with these Jewish children. That's just this young girl. So it is a very, very interesting book. Highly recommended if you're doing Holocaust studies. I would definitely wait age-wise till middle schoolish. This is definitely at minimum 6th grade or above to read and to really discuss this type of topic, just because you don't want to hide it. You want to talk about what happened. I use these books just because these women survived, particularly Hide and Seek and The Upstairs Room. These women survived the war. They weren't in the camps. So you can read it without, in this, about 6th grade, without really hiding anything. You're talking about the people who survived, and you're kind of talking about some of it. It's a good introduction to the topic and what went on and how these people lived. The ones specifically survived, as opposed to Anne Frank, which of course again has a much sadder ending. And no, I have not read the Diary of Anne Frank. And again, Anne Frank, it's a very, very, very different tale. She's hiding with her parents most of the time. Johanna, and then in the case of Ida Vos, most of the war they are spent, in the case of Ida Vos, with a younger sister, and in the case of Johanna Reiss, alone, where they're being hid by other people. So, and again, for some reason, these books have a tendency to take place in Holland. Don't know why that is. But again, very, very good book. Great for this topic. Again, 6th grade would be the youngest I would read this. I have a cat in my lap, being cranky. So it is a highly book that I highly recommend when you're talking about World War II, specifically the genocide that happened both to the Jews and to various other people throughout Europe during basically the Nazi reign of terror, both the war and the genocide, commonly referred to as a Holocaust, but it's definitely more of a genocide because it wasn't just the Jews. They were the vast majority of it, but they killed the gypsies. They killed pretty much anybody who was undesirable. They killed the Polish. They killed everybody because that's what they do. So it was very much a genocide fueled by crazy eugenics. If you don't know what that means, it's basically talking about pure genetics. Originated in the United States, oddly enough. But that's a different topic. That's the end of this video. We're talking about that book. So if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. I cover books like this. I cover fiction stuff. I cover various different films. I do some travel videos, as well as some educational, secular education stuff. We are a secular homeschooling family. My daughter's really young, so the curriculum stuff and the project kind of thing is just starting to rev up. By the time you guys see this, my daughter will be a little over 3 years old. At the time I'm filming this, she's a little over 2.5. So that is coming. So be sure to like and subscribe, leave a positive comment if you haven't. Check out what I've got. I have a decent sized library by the time you guys see this. And look forward to more. Thank you.